Good morning. Can everyone hear me, I hope? Um,
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I was having a little difficulty with WebEx. I'm muting and stuff. So yeah, good morning. So we're gonna do this kind of two ways. We're gonna talk through some basic tips for planning and scheduling work, and then we have a little demo that Tom was kind enough to put together as a recording, which we'll run through, which will just show some tools within the AssetWorks software, and then circle back for a wrap up and some Q&A. So this also builds a little bit on a few of the webinars I did last year. So it's kind of the third one here in the series. So with that, we'll get started with this because Bradley, you already introduced us. I've been with AssetWorks for 12 years now and been in this industry for about 30. And so I'm just going to talk through some experience working with similar type customers in both facilities and parks and rec and other spaces. And so as we go through, we'll talk about maintenance. We'll talk about some tools for planning and building schedules, and then we'll kind of walk through a little demonstration and then do a wrap up. So with that, I'm just going to dive in. So one of the things, and I'm sure most of you are aware, it's the reason we want to do maintenance is so that our assets, our infrastructure operates effectively and safely, right? And this covers a wide range of areas between buildings, parks, other fixed assets. Our focus today is a little bit more on the facility kind of vertical infrastructure side. But the idea is, you look at maintenance in a couple of different ways. One, obviously, is preventative or routine maintenance. You want to get out in front of things that may be failing. Corrective maintenance is usually, repairing things that broke or repairing things you identified as problematic through an inspection, before it becomes a bigger problem. And then in some cases, there's like safety compliance, you know, inspecting playgrounds, for example, in a park to make sure they're safe for children to play on. Or you may have regulatory compliance issues, like inspecting an elevator on an annual basis to make sure it's recertified for operation, or annual fire marshal inspections of fire extinguishers and fire alarm systems in buildings. So these are the drivers behind maintenance, some of which are on fixed schedules, some of it which may be on somewhat of a flexible schedule. So some of the things that we want to accomplish by driving and being effective in our maintenance planning and execution is obviously we keep equipment operating at an optimal performance. We can extend lifespan by properly taking care of assets. Think about, for example, your car, right? Why do you change oil on some frequent basis? Because you want to make sure you get the maximum life out of the vehicle. You don't want it to fail. And it's the same with an air handling unit or a furnace. We want to replace filters on a recurring basis so the airflow is good and doesn't potentially burn out motors or blowers or things of that nature. Same idea that we want to maintain schedules. And as I talked to as well, there are compliance issues around some pieces of equipment, and we don't want equipment to be offline, right? Because we need it to be working it for what it's designed for. And that leads to the things that are the consequences of poor maintenance, right? That our repair costs go up, right? It's more expensive to chase the maintenance of a piece of equipment or a structural element of a building, whether that be the roof, electrical issues, it could be or mechanical. Or chasing maintenance on those things, it increases cost, because it takes longer to fix. You potentially have components you have to replace more frequently, and you get the downtime, which could add additional costs. We have shorter lifespans, meaning we're replacing it. And if the heating isn't working if the cooling isn't working in Arizona in the summer, you have low employee morale as well. So there are those things, basically those considerations to be made as to why we want to be more proactive in keeping things running smoothly. So some of the tools within the system, and these are the ones we're going to talk about a little bit today, and in the demonstration we have later, we're going to cover as well. But one are calendar-based schedules, right? Things that we can put on a calendar. That might be in the way we set it up. So in other words, every April 1st, I need to do this inspection, right? Or every 90 days, I need to perform this check or this filter replacement. The other part of the scheduling piece is that, maybe I know the teams, and we have customers that do this, where I know this crew or this team are responsible for these assets. So when I generate routine or scheduled maintenance, I can automatically assign it to them, right? So it automatically shows up in their queue. And because they know what they have to do and they work out amongst themselves how to do it. It also, by doing that, it allows them to kind of self-manage the work a little bit. So if you have a primary and a secondary person, it allows them to communicate with each other. If one's not available, the other is picking up the slack, and it happens in a little more of an automated fashion that way. The other part is availability. So you may not be able to do like a filter replacement on a furnace on certain days because you have to shut the furnace off. If it's the middle of winter and it's a monthly replacement, you probably don't want to do that when people are in the building. You may want to do that on a Saturday or after hours. We have one customer that maintains a correctional facility. Their facility maintenance guys can only access certain assets that they need to regularly inspect during periods of lockdown in the prison. So they have to schedule around the fact that they can only get in there between 1 and 3, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for example. So they have to make their schedules around that. That's the concept of the asset availability, right? So those are some of the things that you need to keep in mind. And the last one here is also really important, is you talk about block scheduling, right? So you may have a building where you have in that building a dozen furnaces. And if you're going to do filter replacements, you want to make sure you're triggering those PMs at the same time, or on the same day, or in the same week, so you can do them together, right? It's just an efficiency of assignment then, that I'm doing all 12 of these. It may take me 2 days, but I know I'm going to do it, the first Tuesday and Wednesday of every month. I can kind of cycle through them quickly. Same with multiple rooftop units or other devices that are geographically proximate to each other and have a similar maintenance schedule, to make sure they're on a schedule where they all come due at the same time. So these are some of the things that you need to think about when building a schedule and building your maintenance plans. The other things to consider are, do I do maintenance based on condition-based maintenance? A number of years ago, I worked with a customer. They had a criticality factor in their preventive maintenance, where a new piece of equipment received an inspection on a semi-annual basis. As that piece of equipment aged, its condition slipped from new excellent to good, they shortened that inspection schedule to quarterly. If it slipped down to fair, they went monthly. So they were constantly reevaluating the schedule based on the importance of the asset in question and the condition. And they also had part of their inspection process an actual visual condition assessment, so they can focus on that, right? So those are things to consider. The other part of that is the lean maintenance part of it. I want to talk about this is how you can maximize resources. So you look at, what are the things we actually have to do? Do I have to do a 45-line checklist, or do I really, on a monthly basis, really only need to check on 8 or 9 things, and maybe quarterly I do a little more, and annually I do the bigger one? So I may not have to do everything every time, or I may have units that require a filter change, say on a monthly basis, because of where they are, how frequently they run, other environmental factors, whereas others I may only have to do bi-monthly or quarterly. So you don't have to have every common piece of equipment or common asset on the same schedule, you can build in some of this, some of the factors in terms of how it's used to drive what that schedule would be, so you can better make use of your available resources. So these are all things to take into account when building a schedule, that just because you have two things that are the same doesn't mean you need to necessarily maintain them or inspect them on the same schedule, right? And those are going to be operational decisions you'll make that you want to keep in the forefront, right? So put a little more thought into the scheduling and planning aspect to make sure you're doing the best maintenance by each piece of equipment. So like I said, when we think about these, and this kind of highlights what I just referred to, is we need to get a good inventory of our assets. So how do we want to manage those assets? You may say that for certain piece of equipment, we want to do everything specifically, right? So I want to inspect each furnace. I want a separate work order, a separate checklist for every furnace. I want to be able to make sure I'm putting filters in every one of them. But if I'm doing a monthly walkthrough of, say, fire extinguishers, I may not need a unique work order for every one, right? So if I have, 150 fire extinguishers in a large building, I may not need 150 work orders every month. Maybe I just need one with an acknowledgement of how many I have, so that I do a walk around and verify, put eyes on them all and acknowledge that, hey, I saw it, it's clean, it's accessible, it doesn't look damaged in any way, and move on to the next one. The other thing I alluded to is determining maintenance needs, right? So mechanical equipment in a 24/7 operation, like a correctional facility or a 911 call center, for example, those may need more frequent inspections, more frequent filter changes, or checking of belts, and listening for vibrations or any of those things, simply because they're constantly running. Whereas in, say, the public library, that's only open 6 days a week and only open from, say, 9 to 6 on those 6 days, maybe doesn't need that same level of service that the unit at the 911 center needs. So I can build my schedule around that to know that, yeah, I can check this one maybe every other month or quarterly versus monthly. So these are considerations to make when planning, especially when planning with the resources you have available. In my experience with many of our customers, we're talking about limited human resource to do this work, and so it's always the balancing act of making sure I get this done on the one hand, and at the same time being available for emergency or reactive or corrective maintenance as well at the same time. And then finally, before we go into Tom's demonstration, we talk about prioritizing tasks. Again, what's most important? What in worst case scenario, what could we defer versus what we can't defer? Understanding that and having a mechanism for being able to acknowledge, hey, we deferred that one last month, so we need to make sure we do it this month. Or we can't ever defer this one, right? Because we don't want the a unit or a cooling unit in the computer room of a 911 center can't ever go down, right? Or we need a backup generator to run a backup unit, whatever the case may be. Because if the computers overheat and the 911 center goes offline, that's a bad thing. Whereas, we could always, we could always skip at, I'm going to say, at the library, because maybe we get back to it later, or because it doesn't run as much, we have a little leeway, right? And the other thing to be cognizant of is, as you're executing a schedule, constantly be reviewing and monitoring and adjusting, right? Equipment changes, assets change, make additional recommendations, but sometimes just your experience in your environment will tell you that, hey, we can adjust this, or we can shift this unit from a higher to a lower priority, etc. And of course, document everything, right? Inspection logs, work maintenance histories. Within AssetWorks, there's a note function on a work order that allows you to date and time stamp notes that document any type of special situations or special scenarios with performing work. Make sure you're doing that. Make sure you're making that a priority, because it will help down the road to note when something starts failing, to have good documentation of what's happening so you can get out in front of that, right? And then use this process to get to more of a predictive maintenance versus a response-driven maintenance process. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and move into the demonstration.
So just to start off with managing and assigning your work, getting things planned and generated. One of the first things that we want to talk about is your work order list view. So you're in your work management portal. You've got different gadgets, these windows, and each one of them drives a different function and purpose. Work orders being a list view that you can see of all your work orders that you're responsible for. You've got an assignment status column. If the button's a silver gray color, it's already been assigned. And you can even add an assigned column to see who it's assigned to. If I want to sort columns, you'll see here I've got yellow assignments buttons, and that means that these work orders have not been assigned. So if I click on a yellow assignments button, I can see one or potentially multiple tasks, and then I can assign work to a vendor, a crew, or an employee. I can see if they've got any skill sets or certifications, what they're already assigned. I can choose them, and I can decide whether or not I want to assign it to a work order or to an individual task or tasks. The other option is through the work order summary. So this is your ability to create your own filters based off of any asset or work order related criteria. Helps separate out that long list so you're not scrolling and sorting columns constantly. I can create these on anything I want. These are just my examples. You'll see here the different statuses. And I can go in this example to this emergency generator filter. I can look at open work orders. I drill down into that, and now I can see what's assigned and what's not assigned. So if I click on assignments, I can do my assignment to the work order. I can also do a new appointment. And when I click on that, it's going to take me into the calendar. And there I can choose what employee is responsible, the date, the start date and time, and then put in the number of hours expected to complete it. That also includes the ability to add any relevant comments to that to get that scheduled as an actual appointment. Now, this same calendar can be accessed through this view calendar button from the main screen. So even if I'm not, in the assignments, I can go to view calendar and then be able to see staff and crews and what their availability is. So when they're available, when they're not available, that's based on the calendars that you assign individuals or crews. I can view this daily, weekly, or monthly. And if I pop this little panel out, I can assign work orders, service requests, and multi-asset work orders onto the schedule. It's as simple as going in and then just clicking the time slot in order to add that to the calendar schedule. Now, you've also got your scheduled maintenance. So that's going to all be driven from this service inspection due button. So if I click on that, I come in and I will now see everything I'm responsible for that is due for maintenance, be it PMs or inspections. You'll see down below here, my projection is 30 days. That's all set through the define filter button. So if I go in, you'll see that whatever filter I already have set up here, it'll show what type of services I'm filtering for, how far out I want to project in order to mass generate those work orders. And you'll see here I've already saved it, but any filter I create, I can save for reuse. And when I do, that shows up right here at the bottom, as you can see here, HVAC, or I could just select blank, and that will show me everything that I'm responsible for. And if needed, I can bulk generate that by using the checkboxes and hitting generate work orders. Now, when you do that, all of those work orders generate underneath the pending column here in your work order summary. Again, you can use the filters to separate out what it is you're looking for. But if I want to see all PMs, I have that filter already created. I can go into my pending. And here I can see all my pending PM and inspection work orders, what's assigned, what's not assigned. And just like we did before, go into assignments, assign the work, make an appointment if need be, and even jump to the calendar from here if I want to do that through the calendar. The other piece then is going into view calendar when and if I want to use the calendar to schedule things, I can actually filter it and say, you know what, just show me PM or repair or show me everything. And if that's the case, then I can see individual work orders and multi-asset work orders that are PMs or inspections. Something else to note, you also can use the schedule new activity button, and that's going to allow you to select an employee or for the entire location and set any type of indirect time or non-service request or non-work order related tasks that I want to put onto the schedule and block that schedule out so that we know, if someone's available or not for things non-work order related. So all of these different things that we're going through all relate to assigning work, which ultimately sends a push notification to the Connect mobile app. So the mobile app is what the technicians are going to use to perform their work. They're going to get a push notification to the device, letting them know they've been assigned one or multiple other work orders. When they go into their work order function, they're going to be able to view their work by a specific day. The backlog, which is this arrow, so anything that's due to be completed already, but it has not been completed, or I could simply view all of my assigned work. And then my work orders are below. I can run filters to sort the list. I can search. You can also use the device's camera here with the barcode option to barcode or QR code scan an asset in order to find that work order or work orders for that asset. There's a sort function, and that can be sorted on things like status and priority as well. Now, there are other functions that allow you to use system configurations as well as the max queue process to auto assign work. So if you do have instances where, hey, certain individuals are always getting certain types of work, there's a lot of work orders, you want to create some efficiency, there can be some automation created behind that to eliminate some of that manual assignment process, and that way you're only managing the exceptions. There's also a ton of supporting reports and notifications. And so one of the last things I wanted to show you guys before we wrap up here and then open it up to questions is the AssetWorks community. If you don't have access, you simply have to email support, and they will send you a registration link in order to get into this. But this is where you can not only look up tips and tricks and these webinars and other documents. You'll see here all the history of the webinars are here as well, but it's also where there's release documentation. And so I'll choose my version. And within here, if you guys want, you could look at those notifications. So there's a directory of notifications you can pull up. There's also a directory of reports that you can pull up, directory of standard reports. And it gives an example of all the different reports and where the information comes from, the notifications. It explains, what's driving the notification. But there's a lot of different PM and inspection related reports and notifications, as well as things like, assignments and appointments related reports and notifications for that as well. So if you're curious or you don't think you have access to that currently, I encourage everybody to get access to the community site, be able to maybe take a look at some of those things and understand maybe what you're missing and what you guys can take advantage of with the system. And I'll hand it back off to Brad.
Thank you, Tom. I'll hand it back over to Doug. That was very helpful.
Okay.
You're good to share whenever you're ready.
Yeah, I just have to get unmuted again. And so I think I am sharing the right screen. Yeah, I just have a few wrap-up comments, and then we can get into some Q&A. But I hope you can see my screen. But yeah, so building off of what Tom kind of walked through, talk about some best practices around scheduling, right? So Tom talked about making sure you have effective preventive maintenance inspection schedules set up so you can trigger work orders. The system will kind of help you manage that schedule of what's due, what's coming due, etc.
Just sorry, one thing. You're just in presenter mode, so we can see just the other slides if you just want to change the view quickly.
Oh, okay. I thought I shared the right screen. Just a second. Is that better?
Yep, that's better.
Okay, no worries. So we talked about that. We talked about the scheduling, about using the calendar. One of the things you probably noted on the calendar Tom was showing was different people had different availabilities, so that's important. You might have a night crew. You want to be able to manage. They're available after hours, or staff that are available during hours. So you can look at that, and you can make sure that the right people are getting assigned to the right work at the right times based on, kind of what I alluded to earlier about, what's going on in terms of the priority or the kind of the restrictions on when you can access things to do that. So one of the points I wanted, to make too is when you start thinking about this, you want to make sure that you have clear objectives and what your goals are to do this, right? You want to think it through and say, hey, if we're putting a schedule together, how much can we accomplish in a given month? How much can I expect a certain staff to handle? How much corrective or reactive maintenance do we have to account for on any given day, right? In thinking about a facility operation where you say maybe couple hours a day, we need to have everyone available to respond to the requests of the occupants of the facilities we maintain for, lighting issues, plumbing issues, hot and cold issues, etc. At the same time as being able to execute the preventive things that keep everything running. What are our more regular inspections? Some assets may require more visual inspections, or at least putting eyes on them on a higher frequency than others, right? One customer I worked with in the past, they did credit card processing, and they needed to make sure that the generators that supported those computers were always going to turn on when needed, right? Because if they didn't, they lost revenue. And so they needed to make sure that on a weekly basis, they checked oil levels, checked fuel levels, did test runs, et cetera. So they had a very high level of confidence that those would turn on. And of course, that minimizes the risk of being offline for a period of time if they have a power outage or some kind of a failure with electrical connectivity. So the other thing is to develop, make sure you have SOPs in place, that procedures around inspections and PMs are consistent across the organization. If you're managing multiple sites, multiple facilities, just make sure that everyone's on the same page. Everyone's thinking about, here's how we're going to do it. And that makes staff a little more interchangeable as well if you're following the same procedure for the same type of equipment in multiple locations. And engage your maintenance staff. A lot of times you're going to have technicians or mechanics that have been doing this for a long time, have a lot of experience. They may have some good insights into how to more effectively structure routine or recurring maintenance. And then the other thing is, again, I alluded to this earlier, make sure you're constantly revisiting your plan, looking at trends, looking at opportunities for improvement or things that maybe you adjust, better resource balancing. These types of things should always be in the forefront, always be part of reviewing, reporting, and maintenance outcomes. The other thing to start looking at is looking at predictive maintenance. How can we start getting ahead of things that are failing, right? Are we noticing vibrations in equipment that shouldn't be there? Are we seeing that maybe filters are being more full or more clogged, or catching more dust and debris than we would normally expect? Get out in front of this, because that may be indicative of another problem, or it may simply mean that you need to modify your schedule to get to it more quickly, or sooner, or more frequently, I should say. And then, of course, you want to schedule downtime, right? When do I perform these? Do I have to do this after hours? Do I have to do this on the weekends? We have facility customers that schedule a lot of their PMs on Saturdays and Sundays, and they have to take into account that staff need to be on a rotating overtime schedule to account for that. So those are some of the things to consider. And of course, invest in training, right? The more training that you can do around your staff, the more prepared you can have them be when they go out in the field, the higher likelihood you're going to get better results from your maintenance program. So just to, again, wrap up in some of the takeaways, because I think I've said this several times, is you want to focus on priorities and criticality, right? Assets, equipment, facilities that have a bigger impact on the operation of the organization, or a bigger impact on your customers, should be prioritized, right? You want to make sure we're aligning tasks and schedules with available resource. Again, think of that calendar. Who's working when? Who's on which schedule? How do I assign work? Make sure you're using scheduled maintenance inspection to gather data to anticipate corrective actions, not waiting for things to fail and chasing after those repairs. That will drive your maintenance costs up, and it'll drive the life expectancy of your assets and your equipment down. So you want to find that balance where you get out of your assets what you need, and you minimize the cost, maximize your resources. And by all means, engage your stakeholders, right? Your hands-on maintenance guys, your managers, senior leadership, even some of your customers, in terms of their experience with how maintenance is being performed. So, that's kind of my takeaways for today. I know we had a little glitch with some of the presentation piece, and we actually got through a little bit earlier than we anticipated. So are there any questions from the audience?
Yep. So right now we're going to open up the floor for some questions. Just one final reminder, if you have any questions at this time, please send them to the host using the WebEx chat tool on your screen. Provided that there's enough time, we'll pass them to Doug and he'll be happy enough to answer them. It did look like a few questions that came through, Doug. What challenges occur when scheduling work with limited staff?
Yeah, that's a good one, and we see that a lot, right? And I can maybe anecdotally share one customer we work with. They put a very aggressive preventive maintenance schedule in place, and they found it was very difficult to keep up with it. So the biggest challenge is, how do you handle the fact that we need to do a monthly inspection on something, but with everything else going on, with the resources available, with the reactive nature of some of the work they did, which included what I'm going to refer to as light duty maintenance, like custodial type actions, it was drawing time away. So, or drawing resources away from some of the more critical or maybe the preventive stuff that should have been prioritized. And they ended up only, say, instead of doing 12 monthly inspections in a year, they got to 9, and how they accounted for that. So one of the things was to be able to flag things as deferred. In other words, we did the scheduled maintenance in February. We didn't get to it in March, but we'll get to it again in April. So they would just basically close the March one out as deferred, or unable to perform based on resources. So being able to manage the reporting to management of what's getting done and what's not and why is a big piece of it. Being able to articulate that, hey, we're not meeting, kind of complying with what we need to do because we don't have enough people, we don't have enough time in the day, is one of them. The other piece would be, taking a hard look at your schedules and determining, as I kind of alluded to earlier, this piece of equipment, we need to get to it all the time. It's critical. It drives the power to our 911 system, or it makes sure that computer room is cooled, where we have all the technology equipment supporting that. Whereas maybe a facility that has a much shorter operating time, maybe we don't need to get to it monthly. Maybe we can defer it quarterly, and look for that balance, right? To see how you can kind of spread services around. And some of that will just come from experience. Some of it will come from doing that deep dive and a review of what you're doing, and constantly staying on top of what you're accomplishing, what you're not, and why.
Another question we had is, why is stakeholder involvement crucial in facility maintenance planning?
Yeah, sure. I mean, ultimately you have multiple types of stakeholders, right? You have those who are managing it, you have those who are executing it, and those who are sort of experiencing it as a customer. So if you need to say, I'm going to go back to the furnace example I made earlier, is if I'm in a climate where it's cold in the wintertime and I need to take furnaces offline in order to filter replacements, if I need to understand how does that impact the occupants of the space, right? Am I going to take one or two furnaces offline when it's 0 degrees outside, and how quickly will that space cool down? Or is that something that I schedule for a non-working time, in the evening or on a Saturday? Or that's where you're going to want feedback from everyone. Can if you lose heat in January for an hour, is that acceptable or not while we do this regular maintenance? So that's kind of where I'm getting at, that you want to make sure that you can get the work done, that you can report that the work was done, but also that your customers essentially are satisfied with the outcome of your work. And sitting in the cold for a day while you replace heaters on a furnace is probably not going to lead to high morale and customer satisfaction. So that's where getting different people involved in some of that decision making and some of that scheduling can be helpful to maintain a nice higher morale within an organization.
And it looks like we have one last question. What steps should be included when developing effective SOPs for maintenance tasks?
Well, I think you definitely want to focus on the outcomes. So in other words, it is the what's the goal, right? So what do I need to be? I want, if I want to make sure that I'm maintaining a lower level of cost, there's a factor in calculating replaceability of equipment called the percent of replacement asset value, right? So if I have a piece of equipment that has a 20-year life expectancy and maybe costs $100,000 to replace, I want to try and maintain 2 to 5% year over year total maintenance cost for that asset on average to get me to 20 years. And so I want to look at a maintenance program that allows me to measure, am I exceeding that, right? If am I spending more than $5,000 a year to maintain it? And is it just an anomaly, or is it a trend? So that's part of it. The other part would be also understanding what the impacts to your customers are, what manufacturers recommend. So bringing a lot of these bits of data together in order to kind of build that out. What do I actually need to do and at what frequency, so you don't end up trying to do inspect 140 heat pumps every month when you know you don't have the resource to even inspect 20 of them every month, and then making sure you're balancing all of that. So I would say, understand your resources, understand your customer expectations, understand management expectations, and then understand the cost parameters of how much budget you have to spend on maintenance, and build a program that kind of meets as much of that as you can. And if you end up having gaps, understanding where the gaps are acceptable and not, or where reporting can fill that and help you mitigate the gap or fill it with, say, maybe I need another technician or another 2 technicians, or maybe we need to look at outsourcing some of the PMs. And we have customers that do all of those things. They look across the board and say, we can do this. We don't have the resources to do that. So they look at maybe service providers to kind of fill that void and keep things running smoothly. And that's, I would say that would be the first piece, is just understanding what you've got to work with first, and then building a plan within that framework.
Great, thank you, Doug. I think that's all the questions we have for today, but if anyone has any further questions, there's Doug and Tom's contact information on the screen, and feel free to reach out to them directly, or you can reach out to me as well. I would like to thank everyone again for attending today's presentation. I hope you all secured some valuable takeaways to keep in mind moving forward. Doug and Tom, I'd like to thank you also on behalf of AssetWorks once again for sharing your expertise with everyone today. As you see, Doug and Tom's contact information is available here should anyone have any follow-up questions. I hope you all have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone.